As we close out the year, this week we take a deeper dive into some of the headlines that shaped these last few months, plus a look ahead to the new year. I'm joined by Dan Shear, editor of the Green Valley News and Sahuarita Sun, and Jim Ninsel of Tucson Local Media. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. All right, I know we want to talk about the impeachment, but there's another thing that's a little bit more Arizona focused. USMCA, we have some movement. I'm going to start with you, Dan. Was the impeachment the holdup?
Well, that's a real good question. I think part of the holdup was that they didn't want the president to have a win, and this is a win, even though the new trade deal doesn't really change much from NAFTA. There are a couple little changes in there for payment for auto workers and then better access to generic drugs, things like that. But I was told in early October when Mike Pence was here that Ann Kirkpatrick and her team, they were on board with it, a couple little things. Here we are 2 months later before it actually gets passed. So I think there was just a little politics involved.
During all the delay, though, did Arizona lose anything as politicians were talking about it and thinking about it, but not acting on it?
You know, uncertainty is never good for business, and I'm sure there were people who wished that it had been nailed down sooner so they could make sure all their relationships were in place and they knew exactly what the numbers were with the plans that they were making. So I imagine there was some losses along the way, but hopefully it will get ratified and people will have that certainty.
It's a very big part of President Trump's campaign, though, so he had to keep going for this, even though ultimately it really doesn't mean much. And you're right, most people won't get into the weeds, they're not going to understand it, but they're going to say he won, he did this for us. Well, you know, one of the outcomes could be that cars are going to cost a little bit more because, again, the wages for certain auto workers have to go up. So that may be one of the things. But it is it's always good when you have the three major countries talking about trade. It's going to make things easier for us. You're probably not going to notice much change.
It's been a few weeks. Tucson has a new mayor, Regina Romero. She's talking about the border wall now. Now she's saying a few things maybe we didn't hear during the campaign.
We've seen the council talk about the border wall even under Jonathan Rothschild. You know, there were definitely opposition, resolutions passed. This is a bad idea. It's a waste of money. We won't do business with people who work on the border wall, I think was one of the things the council did a few years back. So I don't know. I think the interesting thing to watch as Regina settles into office is what's going to happen with the city manager and what's going to happen with the police chief. I hear there's tensions between both those positions within the city and with the mayor. And we have never had much luck in keeping a city manager for very long in the city of Tucson. We seem to turn him over every 2 years. Mike Ortega's been there for 4 or 5 years now. He seems to have brought some real stability there, but whether that will continue, I think, remains to be seen.
Dan, it's not uncommon for a candidate not to say certain things about hot button issues like the border wall. What will this do to the city of Tucson, sort of in the state, if she takes a stance on immigration?
Well, you know, I think the people in Tucson already told us what they think of Sanctuary City, which was they blew it out of the water. They did not want that. Climate change, while it's an important national, international issue, I'm not sure that Tucson, that should really be a priority here. And the border wall, too. I mean, Tucson itself has a lot of issues. Like other cities, they're struggling to draw people to the police force. And there are morale issues there, and there are issues throughout City Hall also. And I think that her attention would be best focused right there, right now. I'm not saying those other issues aren't important. I'm just saying that they shouldn't be a priority.
What are the priorities in the city of Tucson right now? If you mentioned some possible tension with the city manager, the police chief, I mean, what are the issues that are at the forefront?
Well, I think, you know, I think the things that many people in Tucson are worried about, you know, are the basics, you know, the parks, the streets, the police protection, those things. And I think the city, to its credit, has managed to reinvest in a lot of the streets over the last 4, 5, 6 years since they managed to pass some bonds and some sales tax in order to be able to fix the streets, and that is actually moving along. They finally got some bonds passed to fix up the parks, so that is slowly but surely again getting improved. In terms of climate change, I think there's nothing wrong with trying to find better energy efficiency within the city buildings, and maybe making programs available to the private sector to try to increase energy efficiency and things of that nature, because climate change could hit our region very hard. But again, those are kind of the baby steps and the things that you need to do over the long term to try to alleviate your energy issues.
Arizona, can we finally say it's a battleground state as we go into 2020?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to throw that to Jim.
I'm going to say it's certainly going to be one of the most watched races when it comes to the Senate race between Mark Kelly and incumbent Martha McSally. That one is going to be a barn burner. It's probably we're going to see all kinds of records broken in terms of spending. Third-party committees are going to roll in here and just bombard us with messages about the two candidates. That one is totally up for grabs, and Kelly's actually ahead in the polling at this point from most polls that we've seen. So, Martha McSally.
This week, though, a new poll shows them in a dead heat.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a super competitive race, I think, and it depends on the polls that you look at. And I think there's no way to say anyone's a favorite at this point. But Martha is the first Republican to lose a campaign for U.S. Senate in this state in 3 decades. When she lost to Kirsten Sinema, she had her backup plan to get appointed, so it worked out okay for her, but she's got a very tough race on her hands. In terms of the presidential race, I think a lot comes down to who the Democrats end up nominating. If it's somebody on the far left, Trump probably walks away with Arizona. If not, it's a competitive state.
Elizabeth Warren has an office in the state of Arizona, and I think maybe a smaller bureau in Tucson.
If she's the nominee, I think I'd go one step further. Trump's going to walk away with the election. He's just going to win, not just in Arizona, but I just think that she is seen as just a little too far left. Biden, though, hurt himself, of course, by suggesting that he might be just in for one term, which means he's a lame duck right away. So there's still so much to be hashed out in for the Democrats, but we'll see what happens. But the key is who they're going to put up.
All right, more closely here at home, though, what's the state legislature going to be focused on this year?
I think they're going to be focused on figuring out how to spend the money that's coming in. The state's doing very well financially, and that always leads to a unique problem, which is that some folks want to spend that money on stuff. Other folks want to give it back to the taxpayers in the form of tax breaks. So there's going to be a fight over how much money's coming in. And there's also, I think, going to be pressure to get out early because it is an election year. And so I think a lot of politicians are going to want to wrap up the session and get on the campaign trail. There are some competitive races out there within the legislative districts, and they don't want to be stuck at the Capitol. Once they're out of the session, they can get on with their fundraising. So I think that's going to be a really key issue. Another one to watch, I think, once again, there's some lawmakers who want to go after the Rio Nuevo district, and we'll see what happens on that front. But I think it's kind of fascinating, given that the Auditor General just came out with a report saying that Rio Nuevo is one of the finest run tax increment financing districts that they have audited in the past. It's really turned itself around, and this effort to knock it down is more ideological than practical.
One other issue, recreational marijuana use. Just this past summer, Attorney General Mark Brnovich said, you know what, I'd rather the legislature handle that than it go to the voters, because if something goes wrong, it'll be a little bit easier to unwind. I don't know that they'll face that this session, but the real interesting thing will be in 2 years after we have redistricting and see where those lines are drawn and see how that affects Southern Arizona.
All right, in the meantime, we'll count on the two of you to keep us up to date. Thanks so much for being here.